computer. So, as I said, hi everyone. My name is Alexandros Haralambidis. I'm an associate professor at the Cyprus University of Technology. And this is the second part of a three-part seminar. The first one was on cybersecurity and threats. This one is on sustainability and innovation. And the next one on the 8th of May at the same time on fuels and technology. And this series of webinars is part of the Maritech Talent program. So you can understand from the name that it's not cybersecurity in general or fuels in general. It's about the maritime industry, whether it's ports or shipping or so on. And this project is funded by Horizon Europe. You can find after these today's presentations, you can find today's presentations, but also the previous ones and the next ones. All of them will be uploaded on the Node, as well as some other training materials, so you can watch it at your own free time. In addition to the seminars that you will be able to find online on the Node, through our consortium and through our partners, not only that participate in the Maritech Talent project, but through our accelerator, you may find opportunities to be trained, to collaborate if you're a startup, do demonstration projects, and so on. And this is just a list of the ones that we're working with. For example, in Cyprus, we have DP World and Eurogate, which are the organizers of they manage the operators of the port of Limassol. We have BSM, who is a ship management companies, Inoport, which is an accelerator abroad. We have Sporos in Greece, which provides circular solutions. We have the Bulgarian Ports Infrastructure Company. We have the Piraeus Port Authority. So if you need any further help, if I can call it like that, or assistant or collaborators, do reach out and we'll be able to connect you with all these companies. And as I said, today is the second seminar, the second part of a three-part series on training various individuals working in the maritime industry, but not only that, on cybersecurity, sustainability, and fuels. So today's thematic is on sustainability. So first we have Dr. Landis from ATHENA Research Center to talk in general about ESGs, qualifications, and so on, to understand a bit more about the finance around the topic. And then we have two presentations, one by Alberto Caprenese from See the Change, talking about their solution and what they're providing to ports and how it's already been applied in the ports of Italy. I'll let him present himself and his solution later on. And the same with Chris Deranian from Euphoria. He will present their software solution and their mathematical modelings behind how ports can report for ESGs and so on. As a reminder, in 2 weeks, fuels and technology, we have Robert Kunzman, who is now actually from Tokyo, from Japan, AC Biot, to talk about their solution, and the same from Bulgaria, Ivalia Petkova from the Marine Anti-Pollution Enterprise. And a reminder for those who didn't join us 2 weeks ago, the presentations were from Petros Diaz about the risk and safety management in ports in general. And then we heard from Lisa Haralambous from Malok, from Cyprus, and Eloy Martinez from Spain, from Action Tracker, about their solutions and how they have already applied them. Please do ask questions after every presentation, and if we have in general questions at the end, we'll have more time for that. And with that, Conrad, the floor is yours for our first presentation, if you want to share your screen.
Thank you, Alex.
Was I sharing my screen or not so far?
Yes.
No, was I sharing my presentation?
Yes.
Yes, you were.
I for a second, I thought I wasn't sharing it. Okay, thank you. And Conrad, the floor is yours.
Okay, great. Can you see my screen? Okay. Hi, everyone. So I'm Landis Conrad. I'm a postdoc researcher at the and an adjunct professor at the Athens University of Economics and Business, and a senior researcher in ATHENA Research Center and I4EA Network. And today we will discuss on some topics on sustainable finance, specifically topics in relation to SDG and ESG quantification. So models to measure sustainability performance at different levels with a focus on companies, and we will discuss a little bit on how sustainability performance is also related with the profitability of companies. So talking about sustainability models and sustainability performance, of course, I guess you're familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals and the models that we use to measure the level of implementation of these goals at a global or at a national level. Okay, so sustainability performance, it's not something abstract, but it's rather a well-defined model of 245 targets, and which can be measured by specific key performance indicators aggregated under the 17 goals. And this is actually the most common and commonly used sustainability models the last 8 years, which is actually methodologies and models which are also audited by the JRC, and lately during the last 2 years also Eurostat uses these models to uses these models and provide also data for to measure the sustainability of the European countries. Okay, so very quickly, as we said, these type of models use key performance indicators for each one of the sustainable development goals. We have one or more key performance indicators which adequately measure the target set for this goal. And models actually are economic models that measure let's say the statistical distance from the implementation of a specific target for 2030, or now the discussions are for 2050. So which shows us actually through these type of dashboards how well one region, for example, Europe, or national countries have at which level they have implemented the SDGs. And usually they are also combined with trend calculations. So suppose that we have time series data and we can measure how well we have performed and dynamically how we performed during the last years. We can also make a projection to a future period, and so estimate the possibility of compliance with a specific target in a later period. So usually most of you are familiar with such type of boards that do provide scores and ratings in relation to the level of implementation of these goals. Now, the last 5 years, there have been an increasing research on the direction of downscaling these models at more let's say local levels. Okay, so there have been a lot of work done in downscaling these type of models and indicators to, for example, notch 2 level. Here I show you an example of such dashboards from the notch 2 level regions in Greece, and these type of dashboards are now produced for most of the countries. This is an example of how this model can be downscaled at a more local level, for example, notch 2. Or here in this example, we do have such type of dashboards for notch 3 levels, so even more local. For here in this example, for 17 EU cities, so a notch 3 level. Now, during the last 2 or 3 years, the research has also expanded in order to translate these type of models in other contexts. For example, at institution level, we do have SDSN that do create models for to measure the level of implementation at a university level. For example, how much the research, education, or the operation or governance of a university contributes to the SDGs. Here, the idea and the models are the same, though the nature of indicators might be a lot different than the previous models. For example, most of these models use machine learning or AI-based indicators. We try to measure how much, for example, the papers, books, or any other type of research output produced by university contributes to one or more of the SDG targets and sub-targets. Or there are models that try to measure gaps in the implementation of the SDGs through budget allocation. So, for example, here I show an example where we estimate how much the budget allocated to 7 countries contributes to the financing the implementation of the SDGs. Now, even in Europe, Horizon, there has been such type of models integrated in tracking the budget allocated to the different goals that EU finances. So, for example, in Horizon 2020, there has been the model was a real marker. So actually, an EC official was allocating a specific integer score from 0 to 100 to the different topics of how relevant they were to specific to climate change, sustainable development, or biodiversity. Now, for Horizon Europe, there have been models that were trying to measure more the effectiveness of the budget allocated to different goals in relation to the implementation of the SDGs, as the example I show you here. So we try actually to measure the effectiveness of the budget allocated to specific goals by processing later the outputs of the projects, all outputs of the projects, and how those contributed or are related to the different dimensions of sustainability or the 17 SDGs. Okay, and that also leads us to the main topic of today's webinar, which is sustainability models at a company level. Okay, so at company level, I guess most of us are, or at least during the last years, have heard about ESGs. Okay, so the criteria for the environment, society, and governance, which actually ESGs are a generic term that we use to refer to factors that affect a company's ability to create long-term value, and mostly it refers to externalities and intangible assets. Okay, so ESGs at the late 90s were introduced more as a topic under socially responsible investing. Okay, so investors wanted to be more socially responsible, so tracking the performance of companies on different sustainability topics and investing more of companies that had a better performance, it was a sign of socially responsible investing and investing more in socially responsible companies. Though during the last 15 years, it has been made clear that very specific risks and opportunities are related with the active management of such externalities at company level. So just to provide some examples, in 2015, 73 companies listed in Standard & Poor's 500 actually disclosed a negative effect on extreme weather effects on the company earnings. Or between 2012 and 2019, the supply chain disruptions due to climate change have increased by 29% in the United States. Okay, so we also now know that there are specific reputational risks or regulatory risks that companies face in relation to the ESGs. Okay, now up until now, though, there has been an absence of frameworks that companies could follow in order to report and track their progress in relation to the ESGs. There has been a lot of frameworks, but the reporting was not mandatory. Also, the way of reporting or the accountings used, companies should not mandatorily report on the approach that they followed in order to measure their ESGs. So there has been a lot of confusion in relation of how what is followed by the companies and how companies report that. This changed actually in 2021 in Europe with the launch of the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. Okay, now just to give a very quick timeline of the most important sustainability frameworks. Of course, we have at the late 90s the GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative. Okay, this is actually one of the most commonly used frameworks, which also actually introduced the mathematical and the analytical definitions for the measurement of a lot of key performance indicators of material issues under ESGs. For example, in GRI, first, we can find the first definition of how can we measure emissions, for example, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Okay, so all of these definitions come from GRI, which actually was mostly commonly used by a lot of companies that wanted at least at a level of detail to report on their ESGs, but throughout the last 20 years, there has been also a lot of other frameworks that added on these and built on GRI, such as, for example, the Integrated Reporting or the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, on 2015. Okay, now what changed with Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive? With Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, actually, the reporting of the ESGs becomes mandatory for eligible companies. The first wave of the eligible companies would start on 2024, and needs all large companies, and by large we mean companies that meet at least 2 out of the 3 of the following criteria. That is, companies with more than 250 employees, or with more of 40 million turnover, or 20 million of total assets, have to mandatorily at an annual basis report on their ESGs. Okay, and later on, gradually, even the SMEs and the smaller companies up until 2028, we will also have to comply, and leaving also very, very few listed companies in the EU exchanges that they would not have that we will not report them until 2028. Okay, now the importance here is that the framework will also require companies to audit their sustainability reports until 2028. Okay, so the intention of the European Commission is that slowly, step by step, we do have an established accounting standard, which is later audited by third parties, as with the financial accounts of the companies. Okay, now, of course, during the last year, there has been, many of you might have heard of small changes to these regulations with the 2025 Omnibus package. So the idea here is that specifically the SMEs do not have yet the capacity in order to measure and to integrate all of these multiple and sometimes overlapping, even confusing regulations. So the EU during the last year do actually launches simplification packages in order to do exactly that, to simplify this a little bit complex policy landscape for EU companies. And so the administrative burden based on the first definition of the directive would be something like reduced by 25% for large and 35% for SMEs by 2029. Okay, though in any case, this package do not revert the directives that we discussed, okay, but the intention is to a little bit streamline more the sustainability reporting for large and medium companies. So starting with that, we will discuss here approaches and models to measure sustainability at a company level. Okay, so the idea here is that companies need actually to perform a three-step approach towards their transformation, okay? Towards the transformation in measuring the sustainability reports, not only to be compliant with the directives, but actually to be able to actively manage the risks and opportunities which relate to these intangible factors as the externalities in relation to environment, society, and governance aspects. And by being able to actively manage, then it will optimize also its value, as we will see later on with some results relating sustainability performance with financial performance. Okay, so these three steps mainly refer to first have a very good map of a very thorough and complete mapping of the value chain of the company, okay? And usually this is performed in companies through dedicated workshops and participatory labs and models that try actually to engage the company and its stakeholders into identifying first all of the activities of the company towards the value chain, in identifying its competitive advantages, top values and key inefficiencies, and creating and of course its business model, and create this type of mental maps in order to identify the most important units across the value chain, activities, and vulnerabilities. Okay, now the second step would be to perform actually a very thorough stakeholder mapping also. So where stakeholders of a company, it's not only company itself or its shareholders, all right? It's also everyone that participates and influences the company towards its value chain. So it's, of course, it's shareholders and investors, employees, but it's also value chain partners, and consumers, even regulators, and governments and local communities. Okay, so usually the stakeholder mapping is performed through participatory approaches and workshops, where we are trying to rank the different types of stakeholders and specific stakeholders of how important they are for the company, and also the level, and also based on the level of their interest in engaging with the processes that we will discuss at the company level. Okay, so usually this process looks like that. We do try to explore which are the most important stakeholders, and by that we mean stakeholders with the most influence and the most interest for the company. Okay, so from that we can have actually a mapping that we identify which of the stakeholders needs to be engaged by the company in helping actually co-design and identify the risk and the opportunities that will affect also its profitability. Okay, and so this gets us to the double materiality assessment, the third step. Okay, so which is the process that company needs to identify the impact of different risks and the presence of different opportunities in relation to many factors across the three pillars: the environment, governance, the environment, social, and governance pillars. And so the word double materiality refers to actually a double ranking. Okay, so we need to identify which are the most important topics under the three pillars for its different type of stakeholders of the company, but also for the profitability of the company. Okay, first, in general, when we're talking about risks, okay, these risks are either direct risks, physical risk, acute physical risk, or chronic physical risks for the company, or it might be what we call transition risks. So, for example, policy or legal risk, market or economic risk, technology risk, or reputation risk that we also discuss. And also by opportunities, we mean that a company might have an advantage in using resources efficiently, or in using energy efficiently, or creating other market opportunities that may be positively related to its profitability. Okay, so all of these process actually again is a classification of different risks and opportunities. First of all, on how probable they are for the company, and also how for the level of their impact. Okay, so these two criteria also gives us the opportunity to rank and shortlist some very important risks and very important opportunities here in this matrix at the right, at the upper right quadrant, where these actually opportunities and risk are considered highly important and of high impact for the profitability of the company, but are also ranked high for all types of stakeholders included in the company. And of course, company sometimes weights the different types of stakeholders based on their impact to the company. Okay, so now, by this materiality assessment, we mean the results, we mean something like that. So identify what we call material issues, factors under the 3 pillars, which are important and company wants to measure and active manage those risks and opportunities. Okay, so an example you can see here under environment, for example, a topic material issue might be emissions or energy management or water consumption or waste management, circular economy, or food waste. Okay, so all of these are material issues under the 3 pillars here, with the example I give you here for the environmental pillar. All right. Now, for each one of these material issues, company needs to identify one or more KPIs. As many KPIs are needed in order to measure its performance adequately for the specific factor, for the specific material issue. And of course, these key performance indicators might be of different type and might be used at different levels. Okay, so there are some KPIs which are generic, that means can be used by or are relevant for all companies, for example, scope 1 emissions, okay? Or it might be KPIs which are more relevant for companies listed in a specific sector or for different units across the value chain of the company, okay? Now, for the definition of these KPIs, yes, the company needs to also be sure that it follows the directions, and some of these KPIs are in line with the ESRS, the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, and the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, at least in Europe. Okay, so, but the models we discuss here are far beyond compliance. Okay, so company do not just need to identify which are the mandatory KPIs that ESRS and Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive needs. Okay, so company actually needs to identify all possible risk and opportunities with the intention to active manage in the future. Okay, and now, of course, there has been a lot of sources for such KPIs, a lot of databases such as London Stock Exchange database or Bloomberg, or the definition, the analytical definitions can also be found in different frameworks such as GRI, SASB, and the other frameworks we referred to. So the picture, the final picture looks like that. So for each one of the material issues, we do identify as many as KPIs are needed in order to be able to measure adequately our performance under the relevant material issue. Okay, so for example, here, just providing an example of a company, the energy management defined for the energy management, it defined 4 different KPIs that gives a holistic picture of how the company performs and in relation to its energy management. Okay. Now, the number of KPIs, of course, to be included, it's different for its country, and it is based on its double materiality assessment. For example, I show you here an example for ports. Okay, so for this example, there is this type of assessment that has been performed to the Mediterranean ports, the Port of Piraeus, Port of Valencia, and Port of Limassol, which identified here for example, 6 different KPIs to measure climate change and environment, which is a material issue, which was an identified material issue under the environmental pillar. Okay, now quickly, for each one of the KPIs, there are specific targets that need to be set. So for each one of the KPI, company either needs to set a specific target for implementation for a future period, 2030 or 2050. Some of these KPIs might be imposed, of course, by policies. So we can have different types of these KPI, of these targets, which might either be policy-based or financial targets, or science-based targets, or even benchmarking. Okay, even company might set a target that wants to be a pioneer in resource efficiency, for example, in its sector. Okay, so the target set for the different KPIs, it's not always the case that are imposed by policies, but might be the case that are also imposed by other targets of the company. All right. And so in that sense, the similar models can be developed in order for us to measure the distance, the statistical distance of our performance for the targets and the targets set for specific periods. Okay, so in this sense, we can create models such as the SDGs that we started this lecture with, which we can calculate similar scores for the level of implementation of specific future targets and specific ratings. And of course, now, when we are talking about SDGs at the corporate level, again, this is not something abstract, okay? Now, most of the companies in their sustainability report theoretically map different actions and different actions that denote their performance under SDGs, okay? Now, at the corporate level, though, and through a modeling setup, this is not something abstract, okay? So this is something that needs to be calculated by the specific KPIs that we use to measure the SDGs. Okay, so there are different methods that someone can use in order to map the ESG KPIs into the 247 key performance indicators of the SDGs. And these could be either with machine learning methodologies, or it can be with multi-factor econometric models that calculate sensitivities of aggregated KPIs at company level to SDGs. Okay, so for example, here I show you an example of how this mapping looks like for Mediterranean ports. Okay, how each one of the KPIs used to track the performance under the material issues is mapped dynamically to SDGs. And so using these models, you can translate the ESG performance also into an SDG performance of the company, which makes sense, which answer the question, okay, if company ameliorates its performance on specific KPIs, what's the contribution to the implementation of the SDGs at national level, okay? So very quickly, and to close this lecture, we will very quickly see what's the relation between ESG performance at the company level and financial performance. And we do that with a very vast sample of more than 11,000 companies that actually consists of 90% of global market capitalization. So more than 11,000 companies listed in international stock exchanges, spanning 68 countries, 59 industries, and using data from 2002 to 2013. Okay, so now what we see first in Europe is that if we sort actually all companies based on their sustainability performance, then companies that tend to have a high ESG performance also tend to have on the short term, so during the next month, tend to have a low return, which is something that we expect. Okay, so if ESGs actually consist of a priced risk for the companies, then companies that have a bad management of their ESGs will tend to have a high return, since investors will want a high return to be compensated to invest in a company. Okay, of course, this picture changes if we're talking about the long-term performance of the company. So a company that tends to ameliorate ESG performance, we can clearly see that it tends to also increase its value in time. Just to provide an example here, we measure these ESG momentum of companies. And so what you see here, it's $1 invested in 3 portfolios. One portfolio that invests in ESG winners, so actually companies that have ameliorated their ESG performance during the last 3 years, and a portfolio of ESG losers, companies that have deteriorated each ESG performance during the last 2 years. We can clearly see that the ESG winners outperform the market statistically significant by 2.11% at a monthly basis, while on the other hand, ESG momentum losers try to underperform the market by 0.83% on a monthly basis. Okay, now this also, let's see that this is also strong in Europe in the shipping sector. Okay, you see here, for example, again, that an ESG winner portfolio outperforms the market and the ESG loser portfolios by at least 1% per month. And also finally, just to close, we can use models and KPIs to measure the level of greenwashing in the ESGs. So these type of models actually calculate alternative KPIs, which are machine learning based and are processing news from different sources, from Bloomberg, from the large news providers, and they try to calculate presence of negative relation between a KPI reported by the company and the reality. Just consider a simple case that a port just report that there were 0 accidents in the docks. Okay, now someone calculating an alternative KPI can actually try to find if we have an evidence that there has been accidents in the docks of this port. Okay, now this is an example of how such a machine learning based KPI can work, and we call this type of KPIs as KPIs measuring ESG controversies. Okay, now if we do that, so the results I show here, for example, in the shipping sector, there is a statistically significant 4.52% greenwashing in the shipping sector, for example, internationally. Okay, so okay, I think I'm already out of time, so I will close here for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Conrad. It was very comprehensive to understand the whole and the whole history behind it, everything. So thank you very much. I have one question. There is one question in the chat. So if anyone else has a question, please raise your hand. So the first question is on the last slide on the greenwashing. What was that peak that you have shown? I think it was in 17. Yes, a bit more. Yes, this peak.
Yes,
July,
this
yeah.
was in July 17, where there we had a difference of 12% in a score calculated through the KPIs reported by the company and a score calculated through these alternative KPIs. Now, it is important to understand here that up until now, since companies do not always use the exact same methodologies to measure and report their performance on different topics, and also in the absence of any type of auditing by a third party. So there has been room for greenwashing. Company reports something which it's not true. Okay, so this is why during the last 3 years, actually, has been a lot of research in such type of ESG controversy, key performance indicators. Try to measure the performance of companies with indicators that they have not been reported by the company itself, okay?
Okay, and my question, although I know it varies based on size, on complexity, and all of that, what will be your guesstimate for a small port in Europe, not something big like Valencia or Piraeus, of course, but for a normal port size port in Europe? If they wanted to do all of the things that you said, to map everything, do all the engagement, KPIs, everything, how long will it take them? And how many people will they need to hire, or, as a consultant or in-house, FTs, full-time equivalents? How long will it take?
Well, it depends on the capacity of the port, but I think that this process is something that can take, I think, something between six months to 1 year. And actually, all companies, I don't know, ports, port authorities can do that at different levels, okay? So this process can be replicated on different level of detail. But definitely it's something, as we said, behind
It's a serious commitment.
Yes, but actually behind that, the idea is that any company, small or big, okay, it has to gain from actively managing all of these risks and opportunities that the company and its stakeholders identify that are important for the company, okay? So it's not compliance only.
Perfect.
So
Yeah, thank you very much.